Hello, everyone. The title of my message today we're going to be talking about the logic symbols that you need to know. But if you're interested only in the symbols, these are mandatory symbols that every serious student of math should know. You can fast forward towards the end of the video. I'm sure you can figure it out because it's this. I do have a message though in the beginning about neutrality, about standing up for truth. And again, this is not, if you're one of those people who, if you're the TikTok crowd, and by the way, just as I predicted, Donald Trump has lifted the ban. I knew he was going to do that. And then he claimed he'll claim a victory of some kind. There is no victory. 50% is now owned by China, and he calls it a joint venture. But anyway, just as we predicted. But if you're part of that crowd, if you're part of the short attention span, if you're part of the people who care more about sound bites or care more about 30-second clips, then you don't belong in this channel because this channel is a serious channel. We have a lot to talk about, and we're going to talk about first. I have a message because we're going to talk about neutrality because in my morning devotions today, I was reading from the book of Judges, the story of Deborah and Barak. Now, if you're not familiar with the story of Deborah and Barak, it is about a battle that takes place in the Bible, and it's a story of epic struggle. And Barak, at the end, he says, "I'm not going to go into battle unless Deborah goes." It reminds me of some men today who are always behind their wives, right? You almost never even hear of them. They're very meek. There's always a man like that. There's always you look at the couple and they are the wife is the one who does all the talking. He has no authority in the home whatsoever, and it just kind of reminded me of that. But it's also one of my favorite passages in the Bible because of the truths it contains, and also because the beautiful King James Version language. But I was thinking about neutrality. I was thinking about that there are so many people today who claim that they want to be neutral, and there is no such thing as neutrality. Think of someone who you believe to be your friend. The other day I was thinking, a man I know actually came up to me the other day and said, so and so said something really awfully bad about you. I thought I'd come and tell you. Well, what did he say to you? I asked, and then he said, it's not so. I said to him, it's not so. And he responded, "Oh, of course I know it's not so. I know the guy was lying." "Did you tell him he was a liar?" I asked. And he said, "Oh no, I didn't say anything. I didn't want to get involved and make trouble. I just figured I'd tell you." What you should have done is look at that man in the face and say, "I know Mr. Cromwell personally. I know that's not so. You're a great big liar." I said, "That's what you should have done if that's what I would have done if he had told me that about you." And what a poor excuse for a friend, right? Just a distant acquaintance, really. That's all he is. There's always people who are happy to tell you what someone else says about you, but a real friend will stand up for you and shake his fist up in his face and say, "You're a liar. I know it's not so." Listen, if someone attacks this channel or me or City Tutoring as an institution, and you're a student watching me and who knows me, and many of you already know me, are you going to just sit by and let the person mouth off for you to say, "Well, I'll just write a letter to Mr. Cromwell and let him know what they say"? We like to know what they say. We like to know who our enemies are. But if they reflect on City Tutoring or me, they actually are reflecting on you. Don't you sit silently when people attack good men who are fighting the good fight for what is right in this country. The man who keeps his mouth shut is helping the enemy. Now, people will be guilty of this neutrality for a few reasons. Number one of the reasons is ignorance, right? They may be ignorant of the facts, but there's no excuse for ignorance, and you ought to get the facts. We had the other day, actually, a rather hysterical call from a lady here in Lynchburg the other day. Someone had sent her some literature to her mailbox. She got some different literature on different tutoring services, and she called asking us to take her off the mailing list. We hadn't put her on the mailing list. I don't know who sent her the stuff, but it was a different service, nothing to do with us. But whoever sent her the stuff knew what kind of woman she was. I don't know if it's maybe perhaps the competition, perhaps who is against what we do. But isn't it strange how there are so many people out there who truly hate facts? I don't want you to give me facts. They might kill my prejudice. Lots of people love their prejudice more than they love facts. All the evil that is happening in America today is due to lies and misrepresentation, falsehoods. Young people, be alert. A lot of you watch this channel, you got to be real careful. You don't fall for what you read in the newspapers or on social media. Don't fall for these degenerate news anchors on the major television news networks. We have idiots. I remember a few years ago, idiots like Jim Acosta, or that gaggle of cackling witches on The View, Joy Behar, and others. Listen, you have to tear down the meaning of language in order to build up falsehood. So you don't pay attention to that stuff. You know what's going on. And even, unfortunately, even some Christians have fallen for the trap. They've tried to get us so bulldozed that some Christians think that they speak out against anything, they are unloving or unchristian. And some man the other day told me, actually in the comments section, you ought to show more of the love of Jesus to your students. I said, well, that's what I'm doing. And his response was, no, you were chastising your student. You made your student feel bad with your video. Well, I said, that's exactly what Proverbs tells us to do. Well, specifically with disobedience, but in a broader sense, it says, train up a child in the way he should go. Or do you think Christ was lacking in love when he got a whip and kicked out the money changers from the temple? And that's what truth is about. The truth is about love. And all these people who are okay with error, who are okay with lies, and they let students go on to fail, are certainly not showing any love at all. How can you call yourself a loving person and condemn your student to failure? I'd rather take my chances with the most, at the end of the day, I've said this many times, I'd rather be with the most hardened gang members and drug peddlers than I would with these fake educators who don't care about errors, who tolerate errors from their student, who don't want to rock the boat, and they have condemned generations of students to failure in math and other courses. You know, nowadays you hear a lot of instructors, teachers, they blame, and rightfully so, part of it is true, they blame the Board of Education. They say, I can't do anything about it because that's school board policy. Well, why aren't you standing up to them? I'm not saying you alone as an individual, but why are the teachers in this country, for example, collectively not standing up for truth? And I'll tell you why that is. A lot of the reasons has to do with because they are actually satisfied or at least accepting of the status quo. They don't really care to change the status quo because if you listen to the majority of complaints from teachers, and I'm not saying all, I know that there are teachers who are not like this, but I'm talking about not enough. There's not enough of you out there because if there were enough, a sufficient number of teachers, then this situation wouldn't happen. But you get a lot of them who are either, they just want a higher salary. They don't want to put in the work. They don't want to change anything except their own benefits, right? So I'd rather take my chances with the gang members and drug peddlers because at least I know if they already have that spirit, when they are reformed, they will be very tough in defense of truth. But I have no time with these fake educators who don't care about errors and who have, again, they've condemned millions of students in the past several decades to be permanent failures in math and other courses too. But don't let anyone bulldoze you into keeping your mouth shut instead of standing up for the truth and for what is right. You know, I know some very ignorant people, and they exist. You probably know them too. They're all over this country. There are a lot of ignorant people out there, and they would vote for the devil himself if he were a Republican, just like them. Of course, I also know some people who would vote for the devil if he were a Democrat, and sometimes I myself think the devil just might be a Democrat. But party label means more to them than the principle. Any loyalty you put ahead of your loyalty to truth and right, that thing becomes a hindrance to you in the battle. And you cannot be open to truth if you prefer to put your personal preferences ahead of what is right. We see that for example, even with the Republicans, with the Trump supporters. Any critique of Trump, even when Trump deviates from classic Republican policy, which he often does. And those of you who are putting your faith in Donald Trump, you're going to be if you are an honest person, I know many of you are not, you'll still deny it, you will be sorely disappointed. Half of the stuff that he said he's going to do is not going to happen, but you've been misled. And by the way, this is not an endorsement of any specific party. I'm just going by what I see. There is no political party that's going to save America. There is no politician that will save America because the rot inside this country comes from within. It comes from actually politicians are a reflection of who the American people are today. For the past several decades, we've abandoned truth. We've abandoned the constitutional principles that made our country great. And therefore, you have what you see today. You have the politicians you see today. There is not a single party today where you have true, honorable people who are respecting of the Constitution. Very few. You almost don't even hear about the Constitution anymore. How many politicians do you hear nowadays in America discuss, for example, constitutional amendments to have a balanced budget? Or protection of the Bill of Rights. You're not going to hear very much of that. The Republicans might give us some lip service, but at the end of the day, they vote with Democrats in Congress. So there you go. So a second reason that we have for this so-called neutrality is cowardice, fear. And you hear a lot nowadays, and it's been a trend for as long as I can remember. Even when I was in high school, I remember people used to tell me, and they used to hear you hear a lot about love, 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 love. Jesus loved, right? But their understanding of love is very different from the biblical definition of love and the logical definition of love. It's really just an excuse for cowardice. Oh, I might get, I remember one time someone said to me, if you keep talking like that, someone might just punch you in the nose. Well, that's too bad. Maybe my nose is too big anyway, and a reduction could help. You can't expect to get in a fight and not get hurt. Oh, but you hear, oh, but people won't like me. Well, they'll respect you. I'd rather be respected than liked, which is a fickle feeling anyway. You're afraid of being called, a lot of people, they're afraid of being called intolerant or bitter. Listen, nobody was ever more intolerant than Christ himself. He said, I am the way. That's pretty intolerant. You can't afford to be anything but intolerant with error. And you can be patient with error. If you have a student who is making errors, you have to be patient. You have to be loving in that sense. Of course you do. But always standing up for the truth, always wanting to help your student straighten out his ways and actually get the education that he needs. So, when Christ threw out the money changers, for example, that was pretty that was pretty intolerant. So don't be fooled by these trends and this whole thing about love, love, love without actually having a definite. Ask them when they say that to you. Ask them what do they mean by love. Ask them what do they mean by love. Oftentimes, what they really mean is accepting the person without any change, right? Accepting them as they are. But that's not the way we should do things. In fact, if you want to use the analogy of Christ, Christ said, "Go and sin no more." He never told the prostitute. He never said, "Oh, just keep doing what you're doing. You're all right. You're okay." No, he said you had to repent and go and sin no more. And the same principle applies to anything you do in life. There is a right way to do something and a wrong way to do something. Or if it's one of those situations where it's subjective, and there are situations like that, but you still have to be reasonable. There are within that ambiguity. Sometimes a decision can be better than others. Right? It might be you might eat healthy foods, for example, but if you're eating, let's say, a healthy dish at 10 p.m., that's not the healthiest, right? So it all depends on when it's ambiguous in that sense. It all depends on that context, but you could still make better decisions than others. But anyway, I thought I'd give you this pep talk because today's the inauguration, and I figured I'd do that because there's a lot happening in America today, and a lot of people are putting their faith, putting their hopes up. They're getting their hopes up high on a man, rather than standing up for their convictions, rather than truly liberating yourselves and being the person you were made to be. You will not be free. No politician is ever going to free you. And if you seriously believe that that you're not going to be taxed anymore, or that somehow there's going to be a miracle in the next 4 years, you are sorely mistaken. We have very serious challenges ahead. But of course, no candidate in the United States has spoken to the American people like adults, right? Because the American people themselves, in many cases, are behaving like children. And because we have an infantile society today that is based on entertainment and not taking things seriously, you have the politicians that you have. So I will not be getting my hopes up high in any way. uh, and we'll just see what happens. The only thing I can do is pray that things don't get any worse. But now for the symbols. All right, I will. Here are some of the symbols that you need to know. I will link down in the description of this video where you can find the list that I'm working with. But these are the best ones so far for the series that we're creating, and they are from they at the University of Florida. Gene Larson has that's the page here has the symbols there. So I'll link it down below because I like the way it was organized. They were organized on that page. It just makes it easier for me to, instead of having to type them all out at the same time. By the way, I want to take a moment to thank all of my subscribers and also to thank everyone who has left comments. Now, for those of you who leave comments, I cannot always respond. I made it a point to try and respond as much as I can, but please bear with me. I will try to respond I always make it an effort as much as I can to respond to at least 5 or 10 comments. But lately, I've been getting so many comments that I just cannot keep up. So I do apologize for that. If you ever you feel strongly about something and you do want to communicate with me, I am going to. You can either write to me, and I am at 4925 Boonsboro Road in Lynchburg, Virginia. 4925 Boonsboro Road, number 130, Lynchburg, Virginia, 24503. The zip code again, 24503. But we are going to be discussing here. The first thing to know, you need these symbols in order for you to do well on this series, right? That's why I was going to do a video with a lesson, but you need to have this as a prerequisite. It's very important to get the prerequisites here. So the first thing is these symbols that you see here are called the quantifiers. So we'll start with the one that looks like the upside down A. That is a universal quantifier, and it means for every, for all, right? The audacious claim that no exception shall be spared. Then we have that symbol that looks like a reversed E, and that's called the existential quantifier, which means there exists, there is some. And it's a subtle nod to the undeniable existence of at least one such entity, however rare. So you could say that for all y, there exists an x such that x is greater than y. It's a bold statement, but one logic backs. It's backed by logic, and logic doesn't need to apologize to anyone. The second set here that we have are the logical connectives. The logical connectives, and again, you need to have these in your notes. If you're not familiar with these, you definitely need to have these. They are not optional in symbolic logic. By the way, I had a gentleman yesterday who wrote to me. Your comment disappeared. I don't know if you deleted it, and if you're watching this video, you know who you are. Let me know. You wrote about Aristotelian logic, and I was going to respond to that because you brought up a very, very fascinating point. You said that some of the greatest mathematicians did not study symbolic logic like this, and I wanted to address that because you are correct. For centuries, they had studied out, they had done, they had not used symbolic logic, but instead Aristotelian logic. If you lost your comments, if you want to post it again, maybe on this thread, I would be more than happy to address that. But anyway, now we have something called the logical connectives. So we have the first one, negation. It's the eternal not. It's like almost like we sometimes we get the cranky skeptic, always questioning. But that's a good thing in math, of course. Then we have, I talked about that briefly in the previous video. We talked about conjunction, very important vocabulary. We have conjunction and disjunction. And conjunction it's the caret symbol, and it means and. It's really like the most dependable of partners, where truth only thrives if all parties agree. Right? And I like agreement. I really do like agreement. Then we have disjunction, right, which is the upside down caret symbol. It's or. It's almost like the libertine logic, right? Either option is fine with me. Then we have implication. If then, right? It's an elegant cause and effect. It's like justice in a way, in logical form. Then we have biconditional. It's the arrow. It has a arrow symbol on both ends. If it's too small, let me just. I'm trying. I think it's. You can see it on the screen. I hope. But it's if and only if, and it's a symmetric beauty where this is where truth must travel both ways. Then you have those three lines there. That's logical equivalence, also an important symbol that you need to have. It is a bold declaration that two statements share the same destiny. Then you have in the next few ones here, also students have forgotten these that I've noticed. And I've been doing it in all my classes, both at college and at city tutoring as well. These are the set theoretic symbols. So the first one are the relation symbols, right? And some of you are familiar with that E, and that just means is an element of. Something is included in a set. For example, if you say the number one is an element of the natural numbers. It is also an element of the integers, right? It is also an element of the rational numbers. But so it's a humble acknowledgement of belonging. The next one is it means not an element of. It's an exile, basically, the great exiled element, right? So, for example, if I told you -5, well, -5 is not an element of the set of positive integers. And don't you be ever defending something like that. By definition, you know you cannot do that. Then you have that E that it looks reversed, and that means has as a member, has as a member, the pride of inclusion, to use the buzzword that is so popular today. Then we have subset and superset relations. You definitely need to know these as well. You have the first ones here. You have is a subset of, which means that it's a deference to a greater collection. And then you have the reversed, and that means it's a superset of. So that's magnanimous in its scope. Then you have the not a subset of. Well, that's an outright rejection. Kind of like how I used to have my little lunch table. I didn't want any engineers sitting at my lunch table as a pure math. No, I'm joking. But these are, and then the next ones are the order relations. The order relations. Less than or equal to, greater than or equal to. It's a delicate dance. It's a balancing act for the ages. And then we have the operator symbols, the operation symbols here. But again, I'll link them down in the description so that you can have, if you want to, I would print these out, but I wanted to go through each one in this video. I would definitely print them out though and commit them to memory. You need to be familiar. Again, you cannot move on in math. This is one of the problems. You cannot move on to the next lesson unless you have this as a prerequisite, as a background, because we are going to be using it extensively in our lessons. So the U that you see here is called the union symbol, and that's the grand unifier. All are welcome, sort of, within those sets, of course. Um, it's when you bring the sets together, right? Let's say set A and set B, if they are two separate boxes, the union symbol brings them all into one bigger box. Then the upside down U that looks like that, it's called the intersection. And only the elite members of both sets gain entry, perhaps. They share something in common. Maybe not elite, but they definitely share something in common. Then you have the set difference, which is, you can look at it as the great purge, which is eliminating elements that do not fit, right? And Lord knows there's a lot of elements that don't fit, perhaps, and that they should be purged, especially from some of our schools today. That's why they're in the chaos that they're in. Then you have that X symbol here, the X. It looks like the multiplication symbol. That is the Cartesian product. And it's really a matchmaker's paradise. It pairs every element with another. And if you don't know, we are going to be going over Cartesian products as well. Then you have a power set here, the sort of open P, or the Weierstrass P. And it's the realm of infinite possibilities. And here you're going to find that subsets reign supreme. And then finally, you have the special sets. The special sets, you need to know these. Right? These are the hallowed ground, sort of, perhaps, of mathematics. You have the first one, an empty set, a paradoxical beauty, a set that dares to hold nothing. Then you have some. I hope that by now you're all familiar with the set of real numbers, the set of rational numbers, the set of natural numbers, the building blocks of all things countable. Bless their souls. Set of integers you have. The Those are positive and negative numbers, of course, including zero, though. Zero, however, is neither positive nor negative. And then we talked about in my video on inequalities, we talked about interval notation, which you have here. So the boundaries of infinity laid bare for our contemplation. The other mathematical symbols, and of course, you should know that bracket notation, right? We use this as notation. But other mathematical symbols you need are the summation, and that is sort of like the great aggregator. It sums up the universe one term at a time. Then you have product, and then you have the cardinals here. It's an infinite choir. Then you have families of sets. Usually they use that scripted notation. So they have some sort of lineage and authority, almost like the heraldry of old Europe. So again, math is not it's not a game of numbers. It is the sovereign language of the universe. It is bound by unyielding logic and timeless principles. So we should honor it with precision and a touch of flair, as any pure mathematician would. So, if you are satisfied with this, please subscribe, because now in my next video, we're going to actually start using these. Remember, I am creating this entire series just for you because I am very, very irritated with the lack of logic in our schools. So if this was useful to you, well, it won't. This video won't be as useful as the next one because this is just kind of giving you the notes, the symbols. These are just like kind of like a prerequisite video, but you need to have this. Thank you all. May you be blessed, and thank you for helping me spread the word. Thank you for your support to my channel.